Hello, my name is Tomuta, and today my project will be on some lessons that I learned in taking 109 AL and 109 BL. So a little bit about me, I'm a third year MIMG major. Prior to these lab classes, I had no previous lab experience with a PI or anything like that, except for taking LS23L and Chem14BL, which were pretty simple undergraduate courses. And in the future, I'm thinking to pursue research after college as a career, but still learning and seeing where that will lead. So the lessons that I learned in these courses are many, but I decided to choose a few that are pretty simple and that have had a big impact on me. So the first one is about wastefulness and sustainability in the lab. Often in the lab, I realized that it was so easy to be wasteful with the materials. And one example of this would be, I just realized a few times my carelessness in using the plastic pipette tips. When I was doing PCR or things like that, often I would have the tip ready with my solution inside, and I got distracted talking to a neighbor or looking at something else, and the tip would either touch my arm, the table, my sleeve, something else, and therefore it's contaminated, and I wasted not only the solution inside but the tip. And that happened quite often, and then it until I realized that if I would just be more focused and more careful, then I wouldn't have to waste so much plastic. Another example of where I learned to be more sustainable in the lab is when we were doing purifying our cultures. We were using plastic inoculating sticks that had a flat end and then a looped end. And we used like 60 of those in one day almost because of because of so many plates that we had. But I'm glad that eventually we switched to toothpicks, which were more sustainable, still effective, definitely more simple and not like scientific looking, but it was just a better option overall. And so the main idea with this lesson is obviously students in lab are expected to be focused and diligent and careful, but actually living this out requires active and intentional application. And I'm really glad that I learned that, and I'm sorry that I wasted some pipette tips and things like that, but I think this is a great lesson because undergraduate research is an opportunity that's made possible through funding and grants. Nothing is ever really free. Someone is paying for it somewhere and working for it. And so being careful and sustainable not only shows concern for the environment, but it also shows respect and concern for the people who have worked to provide these classes for us, which I'm thankful for. And a second lesson that I learned is that small details do impact overall project quality. And you may be wondering why I have a picture of knitting. I am not a knitter. I don't know exactly what this is, but as I was reflecting on the quarter, this kind of analogy just was always stuck in my head, and I found it very helpful to express the lesson that I learned. So what you see here in this photo is a pretty neat rectangle of knitting. The stitches are pretty neat, it's a nice shape, and overall it looks pretty clean. But if we look at this one, this is very sloppy, and I like this photo especially because the captions point out the errors that the person made. And I guess the main idea here is, just like knitting, attention to the small details at every step really matters. If not, you can end up with a very sloppy project of low quality and not much appeal. And so the main idea here is just that paying attention to details and prioritizing precision and clarity will contribute to a neat project overall. And some examples of ways that are important to prioritize precision and care could just be like reading a scale properly, rounding off values properly, staying clean to limit contamination, properly labeling plates, and etc. And one example that I experienced in this class was we had some plates that weren't labeled properly, so we didn't know from what trial they were or what date they were. And this is really unfortunate because if they had grown nice colonies or nice clearings, that makes the data unusable because we don't know exactly where it's from and from what will isolate. And so paying attention to details and prioritizing precision and clarity is also important to make your data usable. And it's just better overall to not waste your own time and your lab mates' time by working at something and then not having the details to make the data usable. And so this is important because 109 and 109 AL and BL are just 2/4 of your life. And it's a pretty unique opportunity. And I learned that paying attention to the small details will help you to really gain and take advantage of the full experience, and just to not waste the time that you do have in lab. The third lesson that I learned is that integrity is essential to research. And just a question, just to provoke thought, is what if all the research papers you ever read were based on lies or false data? How would this affect the reliability and definition of science? And as I was thinking about this lesson that I learned, I found it really important because science is supposed to be factual and trustworthy. And so in order to have the field of science, which is very broad, as trustworthy and truthful and factual, it's going to start with each individual researcher and in them reporting their data. And so there, in our class, there were a few instances in 109 AL and 109 BL where, you know, if the results were tweaked slightly, then it would best follow our narrative and it would just make our project look so much better. But unfortunately, I'm glad that we just chose to stick with actual results, because it's the right thing to do. And also, it's the best way to gain experience and learn from mistakes by having mistakes instead of actually covering them up. And so the main idea from this very simple lesson that I learned was just that integrity and honesty are essential to facts and research. And in my personal perspective also, they're not only essential to the field of science, but they're also important because each person has more responsibility to just be honest and truthful. And the last lesson that I learned is just that experience in lab has made me a better researcher. And I'm really thankful for that. I was really nervous going into lab. I didn't feel prepared or like I had any experience. But with time and with experience, it's very awesome to look back and see improvement and lessons learned. And so I learned that mistakes are inevitable, but shouldn't be a stumbling block. Instead, they should be motivation to do better and to pursue excellence more. And I also learned that skills do improve with practice. That's why skills in the lab like streak plating and things like that, which are hard, it's important to not give up and not just say, oh, I can't do that, let someone else do it, but just keep trying because skills do improve with practice. And lastly, a great lesson that I'm very thankful that I realized some of my personal strengths and weaknesses as a person and as a lab worker or lab mate through these classes. And so I'm very thankful for 109 AL and 109 BL in teaching me so much, not only about science and actual lab processes, how to use lab equipment and things like that, but I'm also very thankful for just the small yet impactful lessons that taught me how to be a better researcher. And although these lessons are pretty simple, oftentimes it's the simple, concise lessons that are most impactful and are the ones that we actually apply. And I'm very thankful for these classes. So that's it. Thank you for watching.